I am here with Michael Lowe, and we are about to talk about the grassroots organizing workshop, Rowe. And but first, I just a little bit about you, Michael. Where did you grow up?
I was born in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Went to high school in Anderson, junior high and high school in Anderson at T.L. Hanna High, and came to Columbia, to the University of South Carolina, and never left Columbia. I mean, I've been a few places, but I've never lived anywhere else but Columbia.
What did you study there?
Journalism.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't graduate. So. But
Well,
I actually quit school and lived in a old farmhouse out in Ridgeway, had a garden and several dogs, drove 30 miles to work, back and forth, worked on a weekend shift at the VC Summer Nuclear Power Station. Eventually I became a crane operator there. And, I speak crane operator language. Which helped later because I became a professional anti-nuclear activist, as they say, and we did a lot of work with whistleblowers, and I know what they're going through. I know the mud on their boots, so that's me.
So
and then
you say a professional anti-nuclear activist. There weren't very many of those.
No, it's pretty rare position. Yeah, we had to raise our own money. I managed to raise enough money to have a salary and an office and do a fair amount of travel around the state and pay the phone bill. And it was long before cell phones. God, what I would have given for a computer and a cell phone. I remember getting our first computer. And John Roof and Frank Bleckman and I stayed up all night learning how to work a K-Pro 2, which was all, keyboard commands, no mouse, no very little screen to watch. I mean, it was primitive, but it was a lot better than me trying to use a typewriter, which I still have not mastered that yet.
Mm. Yeah, that was the one thing my mother told me to study in high school. She said, you need a skill just to fall back on. And it's one of the best things I ever learned.
Yeah, I lasted about 2 days in typing class.
Yeah, well, shorthand would have been nice too.
Yeah. Well, I kind of learned, we did several interventions in nuclear operating licenses with Duke Power Company, what was then Duke Power Company. And, you sit and take notes all day. And
right.
Having shorthand would have been a blessing, but I'm not that smart.
I don't believe that. But how long were you at VC Summer? Brett said that you were doing construction, so I didn't know you were actually part of the operation. What were you?
I hired on there as a laborer, 72, I think, something like that. And I quickly learned you don't want to be a laborer, and I got to be this guy's oiler on his crane. He said, "Hey, you want to be an oiler?" And I said, "Yeah," which was, keeping the crane clean and check the oil and make sure it's got fuel and all that stuff. Grease the sheaves, as they call them,
right.
all the little pulleys on the boom. And those cranes had 305 feet of boom in them. So sometimes I got to go to the top of the boom and grease the thing, which was awesome.
Yeah.
This time of year, it was awesome because they hadn't filled Lake Monticello yet. And they had done a lot of cutting the wood in the lake there, but a lot of it was left, and it looked like a sea of dogwoods. It looked like it snowed in the woods because of all the dogwoods were visible. It was way cool. It only lasted a couple of days.
Yeah, those are my favorite trees.
Yeah.
So you said around 72, but was it a couple of years, or how long were you there?
Yeah, I was there about 3 years, I think.
About 3 years. And then Brett said something about you being involved with 221 Pickens and the red potato.
Yeah, I knew Mike Craig. And a lot of the guys from Frank Lee, and a lot of the guys that started the 221 Pickett Street Co-op. And Michael we built all the interior of that building. I wasn't a great carpenter, but I knew how to read a rule. And Michael gave me explicit instructions for everything we did, which was deal with it. So I dealt with it, and we built booths and counters and all that stuff in 221. And while we were doing that, we set up a carpentry shop in Michael's father's warehouse. And thus began the Red Potato Woodworking Collective, as it was known. But we were half a dozen to a dozen guys at different times, and did custom cabinetry for the most part. Did a lot of other things. I was thinking, you know, what was my first connection with Grow? I worked with Brett. We got a contract to rebuild all the porches in this apartment complex. There are like 100 of them or more. And they had built the thing so water was getting in the sliding doors on all the upstairs porches and ruining the downstairs apartment. So Brett and I rebuilt all of these porches, and Brett was always like 2 hours late. You know, I know you know the story. I know you know this story, but that's kind of how I got to know Brett, I think, if I remember correctly. But I remember Brett had rented the building or somehow acquired the building down on Bluff Road and wanted to redo the interior there. We were lucky this place didn't fall down on top of us the first day we were there, much less, 20 years later.
Right.
But we salvaged, I think the statute of limitations has probably run out by now. We salvaged the timbers from a washed out bridge in Lexington County and used that to frame the concrete wall that we tore out the wall and framed it in these railroad ties or bridge ties that we had procured. And that was, you know, the beginning of Grow. I think I installed the countertop in there, if I remember correctly. And the bar had a bunch of drain lines and stuff that ran from the front of the bar, and we built a rail there. So I think we used a stair rail that we'd pilfered from somewhere.
Well, who was responsible for that bathroom?
Not me. I had nothing to do with that bathroom.
I still have nightmares about that. And those stairs.
And did you ever go in Merle and the outside stairs? Yeah.
Well, no. How long? I didn't realize. I had forgotten that the inside stairs weren't always there. So in the early days, you had to go outside to go upstairs, and there was a payphone downstairs. So imagine trying to run.
I'd forgotten the payphone, but yeah, you're right. There was a payphone.
And did you know the story about that? That after they took the payphone out, they used that same number to have like a NARC tip line.
I did know that.
Oh my God. Anyway,
in that building.
I forgot where we were. I didn't realize that you were actually there from the very, very beginning of building the thing. I guess I should have put.
Yeah, you know, that was probably my biggest contribution, because I was doing Palmetto Alliance at the time, and that was kind of all in.
And there was an office then, right, in Grow, and then you moved out, and there was a split. Apparently, I don't know how serious it was.
There was a split. I don't remember ever having a real joint office. We rented a place. We rented a place down in Five Points, which is no longer there. It was right across. There was an alley, and Austin Wilkes had an office right across the alleyway there. It was right down almost on the middle of Five Points. It was on Divine Street. And it was, you know, 2 rooms and a bathroom, and that was it. A closet. We had a closet, and we got broken into fairly often. Our prized possession was like a Selectric 2 or something, you know, $800 typewriter. And we eventually had copy machines, all this stuff, but people were always breaking into this place. So somehow we got a burglar alarm. And And I was on the list. I was first on the list to call when they got the burglar alarm, went off, which it did fairly often. But they called me, and then they called the city of Columbia, and we usually arrived about the same time because I didn't live very far away. And one night they said glass was breaking there, so I went down there, and the city cop that met me, I unlocked the door, and he said he was going in. He said, "Cover me." It's like, what?
No,
This is not my job.
no.
And we went into there, and there was a guy crouched behind the desk with a sharpened screwdriver. He'd been out of jail like 5 days or something. And we're listening to the radio, and there's another cop, City of Columbia, coming down the alleyway, Austin Wilkes, and he's saying, "Stop, stop, stop, show me your hands." And then ultimately there was silence. And so we went around there, and this guy's accomplice was coming out of the window at my desk, and he had a pair of flip-flops in his hand, and he was running up the alleyway towards the cop, and he didn't shoot him. He could have easily, over an $800 typewriter.
Good Lord.
Yeah. Cover me, he said.
I don't like that story, Michael. Wow. So
That was the most excitement
office?
ever went on. That was most excitement ever went on in it.
Yeah, well, that's the kind of threat of violence is what shut Grow down. I mean, the cafe part at some point, because
Yeah, I really wasn't around very much at that point, but yeah, that potential was always there. That place before, if I remember correctly, had been a neighborhood bar.
yeah,
So there were a lot of people from the neighborhood that came in there. I don't know. I always got along with people. They were, Pete and Tina were right around the corner, and they were always there, and they were wonderful people.
no, it used to be Nadine's, and yes, so there was, but I mean, that was the beauty of Grow, though, too. I
Yeah.
think was the fact that there was this beautiful cross pollination that was rare, if not ever, in Columbia. At that
Yeah.
point, like not just black, white, but intergenerational and labor people and people from the state house. And you had just a real commingling and weirdos, a lot of weirdos. So,
Yeah, I mean, there's a
maybe-
real, and talk about Merle. I remember Merle handling those weirdos pretty well, gently and not physically.
yeah, no, he had a skill in
Yeah.
that way. So
Yeah.
now that you brought him up, well, I'm kind of jumping around, but one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is to talk about people that aren't with us anymore. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this project, because just like, Vietnam vets or people from the civil rights movement, I think this stuff deserves to be protected and preserved and celebrated. The anti-nuclear work and the anti-war stuff, I think has not gotten, at least here, gotten the attention it deserves. So I appreciate you taking the time to kind of help me here. But in terms of Merle, I mean, he was one of a kind of cat. And I know that
Merle
you knew
Clymer
him
and
really
Truesdale, let me
well.
tell you.
So tell me,
Merle-
when you think about him, what do you think?
Well, the wound's still a little raw. What do I think about Merle? What I think of Merle is the last time I saw him. And we were in his nursing home, and I was playing music. I played in memory of Elizabeth Reed, and I thought he was going to die at the time. Actually, I was kind of hoping he would. But if you ever seen anybody die, their eyes roll back in their head, and his eyes roll back in his head, and he lifted his arm up. He kind of lifted his arm up, and then kind of went back to what was normal for him at the time. But he didn't die. He was still there. We said goodbye. And they called me late that night, early that morning, and told me he died. He waited until Earth Day to die. He did. So Merle was a cat, man. He was a character. He was, Merle is the one you want to interview for this, because Merle remembered everything. Merle knew more about me and my past than I did. I think he probably had a file on 500 people in his that impenetrable room that he had at Grove. Merle was a special guy.
I really appreciate that, Michael, because he really was. And ooh, I didn't expect to go.
Merle was an intellectual. Merle, you know, I have several different groups of friends, people that I don't see often. I have a river family, and I've told Merle stories around campfires fairly often. So the people that I go on river trips with know Merle. I always introduce Merle as a philosopher. Merle was a philosopher, but Merle couldn't operate a wheelbarrow. I mean, I remember Merle didn't
You ever
get his
been in a car
driver's.
with him?
Merle didn't get his driver's license till he was like 40 years old.
And you shouldn't have had it then.
And I remember standing out in front of the Grow building. You know, it was our local after work kind of place. We stand out front, we're drinking beer, telling lies. And here comes Merle in the van, the newly acquired blue Ford van that he was delivering printing jobs in. And in unison, everybody says, "Here comes Merle, get out of the way." And all he's got to do is pull straight into the parking place in front of the building. And he pulls in and hits the building, just parking. And it was like, that's normal. So that was my boy Merle.
I think everybody got in the thing with him once, and that would be it, you know, because
I never did. I don't think I ever rode with Merle.
Brakes, the gas brakes. It was like, holy moly. But yeah, he was not mechanically inclined, but he had other skills.
Yeah, and he was a determined worker. I mean, you give Merle a task, and he would try to finish it. You know. So.
But I mean, to work with him was a whole nother thing, because like Wendy called him like the Pope of 5 Points. So he had his like cadre down at Goats and places like that where he'd hold court. But to work with him, man, was a whole nother thing. And I did that for 8 years or 9 years. And so you never knew when you'd come in the morning, you just never knew which Merle was going to be there. Like, you know.
I think Wendy called him Earl. There was Merle and then there was Earl.
Yeah, but I don't know if he was like that in public, you know, because I never saw. I mean, I've been to parties with him and everything, but I wasn't really the bar scene and 5 Points kind of chick. So
me either. I never hung out at group or any place like that.
Okay.
Merle.
So that's a whole nother personality that I don't really know of his.
You should talk to Caroline. Caroline knows that personality of Merle. Yeah, you should definitely talk. Caroline.
Did you ever see him perform?
Yeah, I've seen him play the harp before. Yeah.
Yeah.
They had the Free Beer Blues Band.
Mm-hmm.
And they
I
made
saw
a
recording of that. Have you seen that? It's like right by the Russell House.
Yeah. But they made him quit using that name because on a poster it says free beer.
That's good. So were you around when the UFO was around? Or
no, I just came to Columbia at that time. No, I didn't. I read about it in the Great Speckled Bird or some publication like that. In fact, really Judge Agnew was from Anderson. I dated his daughter, two of his daughters, in high school and junior high. And, I'd been duck hunting and dove hunting with Judge Agnew. So I knew Judge Agnew's proclivities.
Mm.
He was dangerous to hunt with. He carried a shotgun over his shoulder and he would sweep everybody as he, walked around. That's not fun. It could not be corrected. You can't correct a federal judge.
Yeah, you got to be careful about that. Before I forget, did you go to Seabrook? Brett wanted me to ask you.
No.
Okay. Because that was the year before things got really going, the anti-nuke stuff in Columbia.
No, I
It's
see
about five,
in New
5 foot
Jersey,
cement.
right? With,
Yeah, they went to New
what was his
Hampshire.
name? Yeah, New Hampshire. What was his
And the
name?
thing was under construction. They took
Sam
over for like a
Lovejoy?
week, and
Is that
it was
right?
the first huge demo. And so Brett was there with a couple, like a car full of people from Columbia.
No,
And we wondered
I'll
if
tell
he
you
was
what
there.
flipped my switch on nuclear stuff, because, you know, I worked at a nuclear plant and I was aware at the time, this was early 70s, I was aware of at the time of, you know, the dangers of potential dangers of nuclear power and whatnot. And I didn't really care. I mean, I cared, but not enough to not take their money. And it was kind of fun. It was kind of fun working there. And I learned a lot. They had the man's name on the sign misspelled when I first went working there. His name was VC Summer. I later met him at Public Service Commission hearings, and we talked with him. He was an engineer. He was a great guy. He grew up. He came through the company shoveling coal at the old power plant down there. But they had his name misspelled on the sign. They spelled it Sumner on the highway sign, and it stayed that way for a year or so. But I worked there, you know, for what seemed like a long time. And there was an article in, I want to say Sandlapper magazine. I forget. It was one of the early kind of South Carolina centric magazines. And Hayward Belser, I think it was, published a story about the Allied General Nuclear Services reprocessing plant. And I got interested in that.
It was Sandlapper.
It soon became clear that, you know, that place was 1,000 times more dangerous than any nuclear plant and was key to the whole nuclear fuel cycle in the United States. I mean, South Carolina was in a very unique position at that time. So, you know, it made a lot of sense to me to go after whatever could generate national attention on that problem. And Jimmy Carter did it. I mean, we spit in the wind and raised our voices, but economics killed it. And economics killed nuclear power in general. And I saw it firsthand building a nuclear power plant. I was a crane operator. I sat and watched everything go on. And, you know, it's such an intricate machine, and it requires such attention to detail in construction that it's extremely expensive. And, you know, it just made sense, you know, Amory Lovin's soft path back in the 70s made a lot more sense to build solar collectors on each house than to spend billions of dollars building a nuclear power plant. And then they really stepped in it with building 2 new ones. Wow. I can't believe they did that.
So I'm assuming that you were part of all those demos that happened. The first one was against Agnes.
I've been arrested 6 times for trespassing at nuclear facilities. I'm 3 for 3. I've been acquitted 3 times, all with the magistrate's jury. And I've been convicted 3 times for trespassing. Trespassing in South Carolina is not being there. Trespassing is refusing to leave. And we had negotiated all of this beforehand, Brett instrumentally, and we had made agreements of what the penalties would be with most of the people we knew. You know, Judge Yarborough in Jenkinsville said, well, I charged my cousin, $15 for fishing in somebody's pond. I guess I couldn't charge y'all any more than that. Unfortunately, some of us, myself included, refused to pay a fine. So Judge Yarborough said, well, $15 or 2 weeks in jail, 14 days in jail. It was like, that's not a good deal. But that's what we got, and that's what we did. And
so does one, I mean, they may all kind of blend in your mind at this point because there were a lot of demonstrations that y'all did.
What I
over.
had for breakfast last week blends in my
Well,
mind. Yeah.
exactly. But I'm saying, is there any experience there that stands out among others that, I mean, just reading about things, to me, what was the most impressive other than the one where Jackson Brown played? That was the first one.
I always wanted to be arrested first. I always wanted to be the one arrested first. And I always wore a bright blue Hawaiian shirt. So, set an example. I've forgotten.
Why does that choke you up?
It was a very emotional time, you know. When you gather 3,000 people in a soybean field, any little spark can set off total chaos. I was always painfully aware of that. It's a frightening thing.
So that's why you wanted to be first, to kind of set the pace and tone?
Yeah, I guess.
Oh, it really is. That's one of the things that I've been talking to people, like Michael Gooding still remembers. I mean, he was one of the SRP6, and that was federal property, and that was
Right.
probably not really smart.
Right.
And you may remember everybody tried to talk them out of it, and then they went ahead and did it anyway. And then, facing pretty stiff fines and all of that. But still, the fact that he stepped up and put his ass on the line, it really still resonates with him to this day. And he talks about how, even though it was just for like a night, having the doors slammed shut behind you to actually be in jail when it's not just like a drunk tank, but you're
Right.
in jail, that means something and it sticks with you. And he also talks about the record sticking with you. That's not great either. But I mean, it means something to people. And I don't know if people, I know young people are doing some of that in some places, but not much here. And Lord knows there's a lot of things that are going way south here.
I haven't thought about it in quite a while. I mean, it does resonate with me. I mean, I remember lots of jail experiences. Some I wouldn't want recorded. And some, Ray Parmenter is the one that did 2 weeks in the Fairfield County Detention Center with me, and he died several years ago. Becky Hardy was in there on the women's side. We saw them on visiting days, which were like the circus. I mean, they had never seen nothing like us. They'd never seen anybody going to jail intentionally, and we knew the jailer. We knew she was sheriff for a long time, but he was in charge of the jail up there before that. And he let our people bring in anything, books, fruit, that kind of thing. I mean, they barely gave us a cursory search going back into the cells. We got away with murder. They wouldn't let us in on the work details. We didn't get to leave and work on the roads or whatever in the daytime, that we had to stay in the drunk tank. And there were, 3 cells? There were probably 10 other guys in there with me and Ray, and one white guy, and the rest were black guys. 2 of the guys that were in there were long-term residents. They were old guys who, that was what they did in the wintertime, was go to jail because it was a place to get 3 meals a day. They had a job in the jail, and it was a dry, warm place, safe place to sleep. I remember those 2 guys, and there were some young guys. The white guy, I've forgotten his name. The white guy you take what they say with a grain of salt, but he said he stole 105 cars and he got caught on number 106. And he had upcoming trial, and he didn't bond out because he knew that his time would count towards his sentence. He was going to be guilty. He was just doing his time in the drunk tank, watching, soap operas on TV and game shows, and Klieg lights on all the time. But they'd never seen nothing like us. And the jailers frequently would, hey, come here, I have a question for you. And you get your whole repertoire of anti-nuclear rhetoric, out because they want to know why you're there. So everybody, by the time we knew, could tell you how many reactors there were in South Carolina, you know.
Yeah.
But the jailers, they painted the jail for us. They had fresh paint on the bars, and it was an interesting experience.
Well, you brought up Becky Hardy, and I know you were close to her as well, and were with her at the end of her life. And I just wondered if you had something that you'd like me to have on the record about her.
Well, Becky was a remarkable woman, the wolf leg, the tall Southern woman. I was in many meetings with Becky, and you know, for people from different parts of the country, and she was always known as that tall Southern woman. I wish she had known Dawn Staley. I haven't thought of Becky in quite a while either.
Well, she came to live with you at the end of her life, right?
Yeah.
For a little bit?
Well, twice actually. Francie got the Springs Company plane to go and pick her up in DC, her and Phil in DC, and because she couldn't travel commercially, she was in too bad a shape, and she looked like she was going to die. And this was like around Christmas time or so, and we went and got her and brought her back. It took, you know, it's amazing when you have a private jet. You know, you leave home in the morning, you're back by lunch. But we brought Becky back to the house, and she stayed about a week or two, and she said, "This isn't working. I'm not ready yet," and went back to DC. And then a couple of months later, she was ready, and we brought her out there, and there were like her brother and sister and half a dozen other people or more at different times taking care of her. She required 24/7 care for a couple of weeks, and you know, she was heavily drugged. She was on morphine, a morphine drip. The hospice people came every day, and I've had a half a dozen or more experiences with hospice people, and they are always right on. I mean, it's hard to tell exactly when somebody's going to die, but they always know, and because they've seen it so much, I guess. But so Becky didn't speak much for a few days, and in the end, she said she kind of woke up and got kind of active and said, "I'm getting my sneakers. I'm going." She said, "I'm going for a run. I'm out of here." And she died. That's kind of a conscious death.
You think?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen several people die. It's almost always conscious or waiting for something or some event that happens that they let go. So
Well, I really admire your giant heart, because that's very difficult work. And I know it's still sitting with you. And so,
I probably got something really terrible that I'm making up for.
you think? I don't think so. I'm Ruth Thomas, was she involved with the VC summer stuff when you were there? I mean,
I wasn't involved in VC summer stuff too much. We did some low-level nuclear waste licensing with Ruth, and Public Service Commission interventions with Ruth. Ruth had, I think, as I recall, Ruth was a scientist, and she had ultimate faith in documents. And you know, I worked with Bob Gould. We were joined at the hip for several years there. And Bob is a lawyer, and Bob believes in documents too. But Ruth had an undying faith in documents. And Ruth always had tomato crates full of documents and would stand questioning some witness. She would stand at the table rummaging through all these documents, trying to formulate a question. And everybody was like, "Is it lunchtime yet?" I mean, Ruth was, I don't say insufferable, but it was a good tactic. I
She was
love her.
relentless. I remember, I mean, I was really grateful for photo ID when we finally got that, because she'd call the office with regularity just because she had to tell you about something. And I'd have to decide whether I had a half hour of my life to give over to this. And I
I'm
usually did, because I really enjoyed her a lot. And nobody, I don't think I've ever met anybody as passionate right up till the very end. I'm telling you, she was
well.
like tenacious.
I didn't say I lost track of Ruth, but I didn't see her in her later years. I didn't see her that much.
Yeah.
She was fearless too. She
She
was
was.
absolutely fearless.
Well, speaking of fearless, I mean, you must have met her, but I didn't know how well you knew Majeska.
I didn't know Majeska very well. I was around her a fair amount, but I was never close to Majeska. When we did the carpentry shop, Michael knew Majeska, and at the time it was Victory Savings Bank. So we had
Right.
all of our accounts at Victory Savings Bank, and I remember going by making deposits, and she'd be at the window there. That's really how I knew Majeska the most, as a bank teller.
Yeah, that's how Brett met her. So
Yeah, I'm sure it was all
Did-
about that time.
do you remember Dip Tong?
Yeah, sure.
What do you
Cool.
think about him when you think about him?
Oh, he's a funny guy. You know, for his background, his English was amazing. Very smart guy, kind of intuitive, I think. That's what I think about Dip Tong.
What about Richard Lane? Did you know him well?
Yeah, I knew Richard very well. Richard, you know, I prevailed. Frank Blackman said, as an organizer, you don't do anything. You aren't supposed to do anything. You get other people to do things. And I prevailed on Richard Lane and Rick Beatty a lot and Joe Byrne a lot for you know, posters and graphics and all sorts of things. And Richard was very helpful and always willing. And you know, it might take a while, but the end product was absolutely perfect. And when he painted the train trestle down in Olympia, that was just a stroke of genius. And nobody these days maybe, but blue sky maybe, but Richard hit that one out of the park.
He really did.
Yeah.
Speaking of parks, have you seen it lately?
Yeah, I have. I still have Merle's ashes, and I was kind of looking for a place to deposit his ashes, and that's what came to mind. And I went down.
Perfect.
I went down searching, and I talked to the city, thinking I might plant a tree or something, and you know, put his ashes underneath it or something. But they said they're uncertain of the plans of the park, and it might not be there. I was going to have an urn made and cement it to the top of the trestle, but I got shot down.
Oh,
Several times.
they're not going to tear that down
Oh, I
now.
wasn't worried about the city. Well, they might. They tried one time. They tried to. That's why it was there in the first place. They tried to tear it down and couldn't tear it down.
No, but now it's an icon. I just think that would be the stupidest thing to do, like when they tore down CCI. What a tragedy
I couldn't agree with you more. CCI, I don't know. That was.
It's better than what's up there now. I mean, Columbia is trying really hard to be forgettable, and but I
used to fish that section of the river a lot in a canoe, and you know, floating by CCI was towering over you. That was neat.
Yeah, I do like that river walk. They've done a nice job with the river.
I haven't spent a whole lot of time there.
Yeah. Well, did you ever meet Jack Weatherford?
Yeah, I think I met him once. No memory of Jack Weatherford, really, except just the tales that people have spit and kicked the door and talked about him.
Yeah.
Pissed on the ground, talked about him.
Well, I guess got one final.
But I knew Jay Hayes very well. Yellow Dog. Yeah. When Dee and I lived in Ridgeway in the country there, and he came by occasionally to visit. Yeah, and he lived with Susan Jane Brewster there for a while on the other side of Fairfield County. But yeah, I knew Jay Hayes pretty well.
I
And he
read,
was totally repentant. I mean, Jay Hayes was totally repentant about betraying Brett.
I know.
And
I know.
Brett totally forgave him, I think. I mean, it seemed to me.
Yeah,
he did.
no, they were tight. Jay came and stayed with us for a few days, like a year before he died, and then Brett went out to see him.
I knew that.
with
I
Merle.
actually, Merle had pictures. I have some
Right.
pictures of that trip.
No, I'm sorry that I didn't get to know him better, because Brett's got very, very fond memories of him, and I really appreciate him just as a human being. So I appreciate you lifting him up as well. Well, I'm going to let you go, Michael, but I just wondered if there's everybody, a single person that I've talked to has very strong feelings about that period in their lives. And I know some of that's just about youth in general, being young and vibrant, but I think it's something more than that. And I'm just thinking, when you think back at the time that you had at the Palmetto Alliance and at GROW and doing the anti-nuclear work, I know you're a pretty pragmatic guy, but do you think that time then was time well spent, or do you think it was wasted time? Or do you have any regrets about?
The only thing I really regret is not having access to the technology. We could have done so much better. I worked for Greenpeace for a couple of years and as a campaigner, and I was totally burnt out. And I would cringe at a ringing telephone for long because there's so many losses. I mean, it was just loss after loss after loss, and lack of resources and all that. But the first thing I did when I went to work for Greenpeace was had an incoming call. The first thing they did was send me a computer with a real mouse, and this was 1988, I think. It was before the internet, but Greenpeace had their own internet. It was run by a guy in San Francisco. Every Greenpeace office in the world, the first thing they got was a computer. And every day, or day or so, I'd write up a report of what was going on in my area, which was pretty hot at the time. They were trying to build a P reactor, which is why they were there. And every day, every office in the world could read what was going on in South Carolina or New Zealand or wherever. And then they had a very active fundraising arm. It was about resources. They had a very active fundraising arm. They had teams of canvassers that would go into different cities, different neighborhoods, and they knew exactly what to talk about at the door that night because it happened that day in their state. And I always thought that was very effective. They were running an organization that supported, a fleet of 50 ships and hundreds of offices all over the world. And their average donation was under $100. So it was like working for the IBM of environmental organizations. I spent as much time going to different places and conferences and speaking and, that kind of thing, as I did in my own office. It was working for Greenpeace was a totally different experience. And, if I wanted, I could still be doing that today, but no, I didn't want to. I was burnt out on causes.
Yeah, it's a lot. It does take a toll.
Yeah, hence the emotion today, because I haven't thought of this. I don't do much self-reflection, I guess.
Well, Michael, I really appreciate your time today, and I appreciate your service to the country. So no, seriously, I'm so moved by the stories that I'm reading, and going back, we had to put this in time and place. So this was just going to be about a certain period, but then I was looking into the GI movement, and so much happened on Fort Jackson that
Yeah,
was
yeah.
so revolutionary and so badass and so risky. And they were kids, man. And then
Yeah.
the same thing with UFO, they were children. They were facing 6 years, man, for running a cafe, for God's sakes. And then people like you getting arrested repeatedly, spending time in jail, and my own breath. It's just, it all really moves me. And I don't know, just God bless you. I'm going to start crying, so I'm going to let you go, my dear friend. And I hope to see you in the flesh sometime soon. We are getting ready to open up. Speaking of Grow, we're getting the Grow building's almost done being renovated. And you know,
Yeah.
Michael Bidding's been doing work there.
No, I didn't. I
Yeah.
hadn't exchanged messages with him in a good while.
All right. So anyway, we were hoping to do it this spring, but you'll definitely hear about it when we do. And we're doing
I'd
it
like that.
as soon as it's kind of
I
safe.
might even leave home.
Well, it's going to be scary for me,
Are you
but
going to have it at the Food Line in Blythewood?
no, it's no, in our Grow building. Anyway, it's like a whole new building for a generation. So it's all coming full circle, and it's really sweet. So
Awesome.
I'll make
Awesome.
sure that you know about it.
I'd like that. Good luck.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good to talk to you, Michael. Thank you for making time, and see you
My
in the
pleasure. See you
Bye.
later. Be safe. Good luck with your project.
Thanks.